This is Life After Sports podcast with your host, Kevin Johnson. And we have a special guest today. We're here with Cecelia Townes. And I'm glad that she is our host, or what our host, but our special guest for today on our 23rd episode. So we're continuing our series, the Women in Sports series. And I'm glad that you are able to be on here today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I think what you're doing is absolutely needed. It's great.
Well, first of all, women rule the world. I got to say that.
That's
And
on period. Hey, Asia.
Hey, Asia. So I got to say that women do rule the world. And I know a lot of times women don't get enough credit for what you guys are doing within the industry. And so, I wanted to take time when I started this podcast. I wanted to take the time to really not only highlight, life after sports with professional athletes and former athletes, but also industry professionals that are in the industry that are doing a lot of things behind the scenes. And so prior to the beginning of the podcast, we interviewed a lot of males, and I was getting a lot of feedback from women. Where are the women? Where are the women? And so I said, you know what? I got something coming up. I'm going to do the Women in Sports series. And it's been going really, really tremendously. It's been really going well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, sports is definitely a male-dominated industry, right? There's no question about that. But there are really a lot of women within the industry who are having significant impact. And we're not just having impact with women's sports, but in men's sports as well. So yeah, there's a lot for everybody to learn from women who are in the industry.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So with you coming on here today, I would like to go ahead and dive a little bit into your story and how you're impacting the sports industry from your end. And so with
Yeah.
that being said, we're going to start with pre-career and talk a little bit about your journey, where it all began, and your childhood.
Yeah. So I was a tomboy. And so I pretty much, that's all I remember doing. I mean, I had dolls and things, but I was always like trying to be outside playing sports. And the first sport that was taught to me was tennis. My dad taught tennis, and I just kind of went from there. I ended up playing soccer. I ran track for a very long time. And my parents, they ended up divorcing, but my mom just she made sure that I could always play the sports that I wanted to play. As a single mom, I'm really like looking back on it now. Like, I don't have any kids, but I'm looking back. I'm like, I'm 33 and I got a full-time job. How did my mom do the same thing plus two kids? Like, it blows my mind. Like, and she would, shuttle us from practices, from tennis matches, track meets. It's just amazing. But yeah, so I got my start as a young girl playing tennis, really.
Okay. Okay. So you
Yeah.
fell in love with sports, with tennis at a young age.
Yeah.
Track too, as well?
Track, I actually started running track in the seventh grade.
Okay.
I was going to a private school at the time, and our principal of the middle school was like the track coach for the high school. And I had already picked up soccer in addition to tennis. And I think he just saw me on the soccer field running. And he was like, I mean, she's good at soccer, but she's really fast. And so his name was John Furr. He's an amazing man. But that's how I got into track. And he just pulled me out. I was in middle school, and he was like, come to practice one day. And because he was the high school coach, I was running with high schoolers. And I was beating them on the team. And he was like, okay, we're really on to something now. Like, let's see what's up. And so that's how I started running track. And I ran track all through high school, and played tennis. So yeah, dual sport athlete. Soccer kind of fell off. I would say, like in high school, because it was just too much at that point to try to do three sports and
Yeah.
academics, and I was trying to be in all these little different service organizations too. So track and tennis were my main sports. And I mean, I think I enjoy sports in general. I am down to go watch any kind of sport, soccer, hockey, basketball, football. But I think what I'm really in love with is like the competition aspect of sports and the challenge. Like is something always to be learned in sports, right? Whether it's like
Yeah.
being a better teammate, or, you know, in tennis, you can literally spend weeks perfecting one shot, you know? And so it's like, it's always a challenge. There's always a reason to come back for more. It's never boring. And so that's what I think I'm in love with in particular as it relates to sports.
Okay. You somewhat answered the next question, which was talking about, you know, as a child, what was your dreams and aspirations? You know, you talked
Well,
about the love, but what was the dreams and aspirations as a child?
yeah, I mean, I don't think I ever dreamed of playing sports professionally. When I was into soccer, like it was around the time Mia Hamm was a professional soccer player, and like we were running things in the soccer world, the US was, and I loved that. And I just, but I also pretty early on knew how much work it took to be
Yeah.
like a professional athlete. And I was like, I don't know if that if that's for me, you know? And I was always really great in school. And so my dreams actually were to be a doctor. Like I remember my mom reminded me of this not too long ago. Like I used to say I was going to be a doctor, I was going to live in a mansion, and I was going to drive a Lamborghini. Like those were my dreams.
Big
Dreams as
dreams,
a kid.
big dreams.
Big dreams, big dreams. But yeah, they weren't around being a professional athlete, and I think you know, I've accomplished some of those dreams. But yeah, so it was never really
Yeah, it
aligned
wasn't
to be
sports.
yeah, yeah,
Gotcha. So talk a little bit about your, you know, share your college experience, the university that you attended, and and
yeah.
as a student athlete, talk a little bit about your experiences in that realm.
Yeah, so I played tennis at the Howard University, the Mecca in Washington, D.C. And one of
Okay.
my former teammates, yes, was actually on Asia Crowder. That's how I know Asia. And it was wonderful. My experience was a little different because I had an academic scholarship. So I
Wow.
played tennis.
So you went on academic and then played. Then
Yeah, was essentially like a walk on. And so I think it gave me, you know, there was a little less pressure. Like I think there's internal pressure for me to do well, but it was like I knew that my money wasn't going to get taken away. You know, I knew that if at the end of the day it didn't work out, like I still got, you know, my books. So in that way there was no
yeah,
pressure, but it was like the one of the best things I could have ever done for myself. I think to
yeah.
this day, 10, 15 years later, I have some of my closest friends I met, you know, through tennis, playing tennis at Howard. I think playing sports at an HBCU is like a whole different experience than, you know, a lot of people think of. You have to learn time management. You're trying to sort of get the fun experience of things like homecoming while also making sure, you know, you're at practice at 6 a.m. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think that I wouldn't be where I am today had I not played tennis at Howard. Yeah, the friendships, the just mental toughness that I was able to develop
Yeah.
is hands down, like I wouldn't have gotten that any other way.
What other universities that you were thinking of going to, or was a HBCU in your top of your head, like, you know, Howard is
Yeah,
it, I'm going.
yeah. So both of my parents met and graduated from South Carolina State. And so
Okay.
as a young girl, you know, my parents would take me, my mom specifically would take me like back to homecoming. And so pretty early on, I knew that I wanted the HBCU. Let me tell you, let me see what happened was I, I called myself, I'm not going to be on social media a lot. So I'm going to put the timer that that iPhone has. You can limit your social media time. So
Oh,
apparently, in the
wow.
middle of our conversation, I reached my limit for the day. And so I just got a notification saying you need to cut Instagram off. I'm so sorry.
No, you good. I was just thinking to myself, I said, oh, not the Teddy Riley. You know?
We not gonna have Teddy Riley. No, 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 never, never that.
Oh man, no, it's
Oh,
okay.
sorry about that.
It's okay.
Um, yeah. So what were we talking about? The
you were talking about just your experience of as a child when your mom took you to homecoming, and you were like, I
Right.
love that experience,
I
and I
love
would
that
want to
experience.
be.
Yes. And when I got to be like I guess a junior in high school, Howard invited me up because I, had good grades and stuff and invited me for a tour. And it was at a time when it was in the spring. And so like the Greeks were coming out and the yard was lit. And I was like, I don't care whatever else I do with my life. I have to go to college here. Um, and that's
Yeah.
really what sold me. I applied obviously there. I applied to Xavier because at that time I still did want to be like a medical doctor. So I applied there.
Okay.
And then I think I applied to University of Maryland just because it was like for me to apply. But I knew where I
Yeah.
was going. I knew that. You
Without
can't
a
tell me
doubt, you
nothing.
knew where he was
Without a
going.
shadow of a doubt. Yes.
Look, so let me tell you my first experience. I'll keep it brief. My first
Yes.
experience going to a homecoming, a
Ooh,
college homecoming, I went to a PWI,
okay.
but I had the opportunity to go to Howard's homecoming. And when I say it was a production,
It changed
nothing,
your
I
life.
changed my life. If I had to go
Changed
to,
your life.
if I had to do undergrad all over again,
Yes.
I would go to Howard.
There you go. That's what we like to hear.
I'm so, look, my parents are Caribbean, so I'm so upset that I wasn't
Oh,
so much informed about the HBCUs
yeah.
when I was a little bit younger, because I would have went
Hmm.
to Howard. I definitely would
Yeah.
have went to Howard.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a beautiful thing, and it's like it's an experience that it can't be replicated in any other part of our lives. Right? I mean, you get close to it like for a family reunion, but that still doesn't. That's not even it.
That's not it. It don't do it. It
Yeah.
doesn't do it any justice.
Yep. Yep. So it's definitely the best decision, I think I could make. I want my kids to go. Um, yeah,
Well, I mean, what's going on in this country today, and you see a lot of
yeah,
students now that are they're highly recruited, and some of
yes,
them are making the decisions. I think I forgot his name. He's going to Howard actually on basketball
yeah.
scholarship. Make
Basketball.
last name Maker,
Yep.
and decided, I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go and take my talents to Howard University. I did my research back in maybe the '60s and the '70s, where football was big at these HBCUs, and
Yes.
a lot of the PWIs was coming in and taking some of these
And
kids
taking the
and
talent.
taking the talent, and which has
Yep.
drastically shifted the dynamic of
Mhm.
college football.
And then,
Uh,
but bigger than college football, right? It causes a shift in financing because if you look how much money these kids are bringing in to these
yes,
PWIs, that say they were at Howard's or FAMS or Southerns, that money, that TV revenue, that would be coming to HBCU. So
absolutely.
yeah, it has shifted. Yes, football, power, money.
Do you think it would ever shift back a little bit?
I don't know. I think that one of the things that I think is beautiful is that student athletes are becoming more aware of their power.
Absolutely.
And I think that, yeah, you're going to see more of them being more intentional about their decisions.
Hmm.
But I don't know that it'll ever
Get
completely
back.
shift back. Yeah. And
Correct.
I think you could probably see the largest shift if we're talking like between football and basketball for basketball.
Okay.
I just think, there's more opportunity for a kid who goes to a smaller school or a mid-major to still, get a chance at the league. But also just in basketball, I think you see more of the kids considering other options. Like, all right, well, maybe I'll go play overseas,
Yeah.
and forego the NCAA all,
Absolutely.
at all. So I think that is where you're going to see probably a lot of shift.
Okay. I agree with that as well.
Yeah.
As the rules are changing,
Hmm.
these high school athletes are being a little bit more informed. They're listening to LeBron. They're looking at
Yes.
Chris Paul. They're looking at what
Yes.
they're doing in the sports on the big stage. And I think it's definitely not only educating the younger athletes, but also helping them to understand the power that they do possess.
Yep. Yep.
So
It's a new
talking
day.
about, huh? Say that again.
I just said it's a new day.
It's a new day.
Yeah.
So, my next question is, what motivated you to go to law school, and in that decision, and what school did you attend?
I'm gonna keep it 100. I really did not decided I was going to law school until the summer before my senior year. I was an African American studies major, and I was looking around. I was like, well, what am I gonna do with this degree? Like, I don't want to teach. I can't see myself being in anybody's classroom, so I need to do something. So one day I went to talk to one of my professors, and there was an LSAT practice book in there. And I kid you not, I started answering the questions. I went to the back of the book and I was like, oh, you're getting these right. Like, let me see about law school. And at that time, I was definitely like very kind of politically active. Like, my mind was very much social justice oriented. I was in NAACP. I was like writing about like charter schools and their impact on, Black kids. And so I decided, I was like, well, that's a way that I can have further impact, is by going to law school. And I had decided I was going to do criminal justice, or I was going to do international human rights. Okay. And so I ended up applying to UCLA because they had a great program for international human rights. I got into UCLA, but I did not get into the human rights program. And I was like, well, yeah, I'm like, well, I'm gonna still go. Like, this is where I still want to go. And in my 3 years out there, it was great. I had honed in on doing criminal defense work. I worked at the Public Defender Service in DC and the Federal Defender in California. And I just thought that was my path. But I graduated in 2009 in the middle of the recession, the Great Recession. Yeah. And so like all of these government agencies were on on hiring freezes. And so I couldn't get hired at like public defender. And I applied to a couple of state's attorney's offices, but I was like, man, I can't be the man. I can't work here. Like, I can't be locking people up. And so I ended up getting my first job in politics. And I worked for this organization called the Office of Campaign Finance in DC. Worked there for about a year and basically sort of moved my way through the federal government. And I practice labor and employment law now.
Wow. Yeah. How do you like it? How do you enjoy the labor and employment law?
I love it. I'm actually employment counsel at Lyft now. And it's just a lot of interesting topics. I don't know if you're aware, but in the state of California, there's like this massive fight going on as to whether we should categorize drivers as employees, because right now they're contractors and they don't receive benefits and they don't, it's a big deal. And so, I get to work on issues like that. I get to work on issues of like discrimination, harassment, wrongful termination. Sure. So it's really, really fun, interesting work. And then because I am connected to the sports world, it's also unlocked doors on the sports world for me to write about, sports law topics. Because, sports is one big labor dispute, I feel like sometimes, with the athletes and the teams and the coaches' salaries, all this. Yeah,
colleges and all that.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Well, look, you have a wealth of knowledge, and I think that's great. I know you mentioned, or you probably didn't mention, but I read it on your bio in regards to you doing on ESPN blogs as well.
Yeah. So that's exactly how that started. Was I reached out to some people that I knew at ESPNW, and I basically told them, like, look, I'm a former athlete. I'm an attorney. I work in labor and employment law. Like, let me come write about some of these labor issues for women in sports. Yeah. So I did that for maybe like about a year or so. And now I've transitioned to writing for Forbes. And sometimes I'll do labor and employment related stuff for women in sports, but a lot of I highlight other women in sports who are like just killing it in the game, executives in the industry.
Well, talking about in the format of this interview, we talk about pre-career, in-career, and post-career. So you gave us so much information about your pre-career. Let's jump in a little bit into your in-career. After leaving college, How were you able to discover your niche within the sports industry? And I know you talked about the, you know, going to law school
Yeah.
and employment and labor law, but how did you find that little niche for the sporting industry? And I think you briefly talked about it a little bit just now.
Yeah. So I would say that after I finished law school, I really missed being involved in sports. And I always had this sense, which is how I got to law school, of like empowering people and advocating for people. And so I was looking for a way to do that with sports. And it led to a lot of failure initially, right? At first, I was
Yeah.
like, all right, well, I can go into some of the athletic departments and I can work in compliance, student athlete affairs. And I submitted resume after resume. And these people were like, thanks, but no thanks. Like, nah, no
Were you
job.
too
So
qualified?
I don't know what I was. I was probably, they probably looked at my resume and they're like, she really doesn't have any experience in schools, right? Like, I, my resume was heavily geared towards practicing law.
Okay.
So I think that's probably what it was. And then, you know, it really takes having your network to get jobs often. And so I wasn't really plugged in to like the university athletic community. I didn't know nobody. Um, so then I convinced some of my friends to start a sports representation agency,
Yeah.
and we were gonna provide like this whole like all these services for athletes. And again, we didn't know any professional athletes, so that was our problem with that one. So we kind of failed miserably with that. But it kept like in the failures, it like kept reassuring me like this is what I want to do. Like, all
Yeah.
right, that didn't work out, but let me try this, because at this point, like I'm committed to practicing law, but I'm also committed to being a part of the sports industry. And so like around 2012, I decided I was going to start writing a blog for women in sports, because that's what I had identified as, okay, this is a group in sports that needs to be empowered, that needs an advocate. And so I can do that by writing the blog. I called it GladiateHers. And initially, honestly, I feel like it was me and my mama reading in blog posts. Like that was it. Nobody
Hey,
really paid
you
attention.
you have to start somewhere.
You have to start somewhere. You have to. And over time, the blog started like really catching on. And then that's what led to me writing at ESPN. But as I started really garnering kind of like a little name for myself, I also recognized that women in the industry needed a little bit more than just to read cool blog posts. We started identifying like events that we could hold, that networking was important. And so we started hosting networking events. And then through that, we learned that they need workshops, especially on the student athlete level, workshops about leadership development, personal branding. So we started offering that. And it just has grown really, I would say, from the blog to where it is now through following my purpose and my passion. I really think that my purpose is to empower and advocate. And I have a passion for women. I do have a passion for sports. And so I sort of let them collide and then let it grow very organically by listening to our audience, by listening to my heart. And yeah, so that's what we do now. We still have the blog. We provide a mentorship program. We have events. But now we're this thing called the Gladiators Tribe, which is like a monthly subscription service that provides all of these things in a very unique way. We're going to have our own version of TED Talks. We'll have executive interviews. Yeah, like a professional library. So you could come and get help with your resume, with interviewing, all this stuff. And the idea is still the same. We are trying to grow women in sports. We are trying to empower women in sports, and we're trying to connect women in sports.
Wow.
So that was a long way to answer your question.
No, look, you answered 3 questions just now, but you know what? I just wanted to say how well prepared you are. But I, I wanted for those that are interested in hearing about, Gladiate Hers, can you
Mhm.
define what Gladiate Hers is? I know you said it in regards to how how it started, but for those who are
Yeah,
like, I really want to understand, like, define it for me. If you had to put it
yeah.
in a sentence of a
So
definition, like,
yes. So on gladiatehers.com, there is an actual long definition that we gave to it. But actually, like in the simplest form, a gladiate her is a strong woman, a woman who is motivated to change the world. It actually goes beyond sports. But it is a woman who is fierce and relentless in the pursuit of her goals. And so in sports, we look at our gladiators as our athletes, our former athletes, our executives, our women who are trying to get their foot in the door of the sports industry. Our mid-level women who are, handling the social media of these teams and who are running back and forth in the operations space at schools and organizations. So a gladiator is a woman who moves in her industry with fearlessness, who moves in her industry with passion and purpose.
well, saying that, I think there's a lot of gladiators that are
Yes,
in a lot of
plenty.
organizations.
Yes,
Plenty, and they don't get the recognition that they deserve. But for those of you that are watching this, I want you to please go and visit her website and
yes,
please check it out. But I looked at it and I was like, this is wow, because I just like the definition that how you broke it down in regards to
yes,
what the company stands for and what you guys are doing. And I think sometimes with um, women who are raising families and they have to be the
hmm
caretaker, they have to take their
hmm
kids to school, then they have to be a professional woman at the end of the day, then they're being the provider, the professional woman, the hats. You're wearing many hats that I
so
think
many.
sometimes you're not getting the recognition that you deserve. And it's not to say,
Yeah,
hey, they're not out there. That you guys are out there. You're the movers and shakers of these big 500 Fortune companies,
yes,
and
yes.
and I think it's deserved that you guys get your praise.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. And I think, yeah, it's just a common because, the industry is so dominated with men, right? We do get overshadowed. But like if you look at some of the biggest brands in sports, like Zion Williams or Dwayne Wade, a lot of these men, the machines behind them are women.
Or
They
women,
are, yes, they are
yeah.
managed by women. Some of them have women agents. Like it's just you just don't understand. And I think that I really appreciate people like you. I appreciate organizations like Forbes that are absolutely making room for us. I mean, we're gonna force our way. We're gonna
Already,
find
I
a seat
already
at the
know that.
table. Right. But we appreciate y'all for welcoming us to the table. That certainly makes our job a little easier.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. So with all the things that you have done and accomplished up to this time in your life, what was the most remarkable accomplishment that you have achieved in your career?
Yeah, I actually just answered this question like the other night. So it's like fresh on my brain. And I would have to say, 2 years ago, we started hosting what's called the Gladiator Summit. And it's a day-long event that provides workshops, panel discussions, networking, all for women in sports. And we bring together about 200 women, all different levels of the industry. And that idea for that started in 2019, 2018, at the end of 2018, as just an idea. We had hosted a mixer like we do every summer, and someone came up to us and they were like, "Oh, we were in Atlanta at the time." And they said, "Well, what are you doing for the Super Bowl?" Because in 2019, the Super Bowl was in Atlanta. And I said, "Well, I don't know. Like maybe we'll throw a mixer or something." And um, her name is Taria Williams. She is, I think, director of communications over at Turner Sports. And she said, "Nah, like I think you should do something more than a mixer." And I was like,
Wow.
okay. And at that same event, there was a young lady who was on the Super Bowl host committee. So I ended up talking to her, and like literally from that little idea, that seed being planted, we ended up raising tens of thousands of dollars in the course of like 3 months. We got 200 women in sports together. We got funding from the NFL, from Coca-Cola, from BMW. And it was just the most amazing accomplishment because, you know, it really started from an idea. And we brought this idea to
The life.
fruition. Yes, yes. And it changed so many people's lives. I know women that attended that first summit and got jobs. There's one young lady who she like worked as one of our sort of hostesses, ushers, and took some pictures of the event, posted those pictures, and now is like one of the top photographers following along Jadena, the rapper slash artist.
Artists, I've
Yeah,
heard
and
it.
it was,
I've heard.
yes, and it's literally because she was at the summit and she took pictures, and like people saw her pictures, and people have
Wow.
made connections at the summit, and now they are friends, are working together, and that's really our goal, right? Is to always push the needle forward, to connect people who wouldn't have known each other than by our event. So that's it. That's um, the probably the greatest accomplishment I feel like career wise to date. And we've hosted it since then, and we'll host it again. But I think the first one is always the most meaningful one.
Because it's I think it's the first one could be the most meaningful all the time because it's unexpected. You
Yes,
don't know where
yes,
is it gonna go, and
yes. It's
you know, so
scary
that's well, I mean,
because I
that's
remember,
great.
yeah, I remember putting a lot of money into that event. I was like, bruh, if these people don't come, if these people don't donate this money, what I'm gonna do? I'm about to be
What are
on
we doing? What are we
ramen.
doing?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So it all worked out.
You know, to talk about somebody sowing that seed or saying, you know, whispering in your ear and say, "Hey, I think you should do this." Believe it or
Mhm.
not, I think a lot of great ideas come from things that are unexpected, from people that you don't expect to hear that information from. Even
Yes.
with this podcast, just because I've been in the industry, the sports industry, with athletes, also on the academic side as well,
Hmm.
that people want to hear what is that transition in regards to athletes that are
Yeah.
currently playing, professional athletes that are former now, and then people that are working in the sports industry. You know, they want to
Right.
know how did you get into that field? How did you transition into it? People, and sometimes if you don't know, they'll just think you just woke up one day, bam, you was an attorney, you was a
Right.
lawyer, and then boom,
Right.
you got a gladiator.
Right.
Hers just was it was a success
Right.
since you put it in writing,
Right.
and they don't
Right.
understand that
And
there was a process. There was a process
there
to it.
was a process. Yes. And that's why, like, I never have a problem sharing my failures. I never have a problem, like, telling people that, no, I didn't have it planned out from day one. I'm very much a person that tries to move by faith. And so I can't say that 10, 15 years ago, this is what I saw for myself. It wasn't,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah,
But I think that I was very diligent and continue to be diligent about like following my faith, following God, and following like the purpose I think He has for my life. And that's led to me, sort of pivoting a lot. But I
yeah.
think it's you can make those pivots and make those transitions a little easier if you understand that it's all a part of the process, right? Like that
Yeah.
with every failure, there's something to learn from that. With every sort of little what we think is a delay, there's something to learn from that. Um,
Absolutely.
so yeah, and there's not one way to do it, right? Like people
Yeah.
do constantly ask, well, how did you do it? And what did you do? And I'll share that, but I always say that don't like that just because that's the way I did it, that's not the only way to do it.
That's not the only way. There's multiple ways to skin a cat.
That's right. That's right.
Well, talking about failure, you know, my next question was what was the biggest challenge or failure that you've had in your career?
Hmm. The biggest, I don't know. I've had a numerous failures. So I
But
like,
maybe one that sticks out
let's
to you.
be clear. Let's talk about one. So I shared one that I think is related to sports, but I'll share one that's related to my practice as an attorney. So when I first started practicing in labor and employment law, I, in the government, you might not know this, but in the government, they like really put you to work from jump. Like, oh, you got this degree, go handle all these cases by yourself.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also a sense that you should ask for help and you should lean on your coworkers. But I am very, I guess, naturally, I'm more like intrinsically motivated, and I'm more like, look at a problem, let me see how I can figure it out. So I got this case, which should have been an open and shut case in my favor. Like, this man did wrong. My boss handled it correctly in separating himself from it, but somehow, some way, it didn't become easy. And that's because, excuse me, as I was writing my brief, there's one sentence in the brief that was completely, in missing one word, I completely conceded something that I should not have conceded. I conceded a point that like really was the crux of our case. And it came down to one word. And
One word.
I filed this brief. I get it back and I'm like, we lost. And in the answer from the judge, he says, well, the agency is losing this because of this one sentence, because they conceded XYZ. So I'm like, I'm not gonna cuss on your podcast, but I said a few expletives. And I was like, first I was like, I really have to figure out how I'm going to tell my client
That
that
I
I
lost the
just
case.
lost this case.
Yeah.
And in losing this case, they were going to have to bring him back or pay him a ton of money. And they ended up paying him a ton of money. And I had to like have the most humbling experience ever of saying, you know what, I effed up, and I effed up royally. But in that moment, from that moment, I learned a couple of things. I learned, one, that you can F up and come back from it. I
Absolutely.
realized that like humbling myself and saying I messed up, the client like was a little peeved, but we got through it together, and I ended up doing some great work for them later.
Yeah.
But it also showed me the importance of using your resources. Like, you're not in this alone.
Yeah.
I had other attorneys that could have proofread that document for me, right? I had other attorneys that I could have asked, well, what strategy would you use? And so since that time, I have been 1,000 times more willing to ask for help and to ask for feedback. And I think that is important for everybody's journey. Like, we all have our goals and our dreams and our motivations, but none of us gets there alone.
No,
None of us.
it's a team.
It's a team effort. And so I'm glad for that moment. I'm glad it was much earlier in my career rather than much later.
Later.
Yeah, so I'm glad I learned that lesson. But that was a hard lesson to learn. I was
Yeah.
like, how I'm gonna blame this on somebody else?
You can't. You're like, I have to take full responsibilities and be humble. You have to take full responsibility and be
Be
humble to
humble.
say,
Yes,
I messed up. I
I
really
messed
messed
up.
up.
I messed up. And then, you know what? I messed up so bad I don't even have enough money to pay y'all back for how much I just cost
Oh,
y'all.
oh man. Thank God for grace, right? You heard what I said?
No, would you say?
I said, thank God for grace.
Thank God for grace. I am a living testimony that grace and mercy is sufficient.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So talking about the things that you're doing, with GladiateHers and working as an attorney as well. While working in the sports industry, what type of impact would you like to make?
Yeah, my overall goal is to really grow women in the industry. So grow our presence and grow our influence. And I think that if we keep, up with our mentorship program, if we keep hosting our events, if we keep giving women the tools they need to learn how to negotiate, to learn how to find their mentor, to learn how to network, that we're going to do that. it's definitely I don't want to say it's a slow process. It's a meticulous process. And it's a process that takes discipline because you have to keep doing these things, right? We have to keep giving women information. We have to keep connecting people. But I think that if we keep doing these things that we're doing, we will have the impact, which is growing women in the industry.
Yeah, and giving them a whole lot of opportunities, which is so important.
Yes, yes.
So talking about that, now we're going into your post-career, and I think you touched on this. We're going to the latter of this interview, and you touched on this a little bit about, your purpose. And so my next
Yes.
question is, are your priorities purpose-driven? And you mentioned your purpose earlier, and I think one was either empower or educate. Let me know if I'm wrong.
And
And
advocating and
advocating.
empowering. Yeah.
Okay. So are your priorities purpose-driven based on what you just mentioned?
Absolutely. I mean, I feel like once you have identified your purpose, you don't feel right if you're not moving in it, right?
Yeah.
And so, if I'm not doing things that are aligned to my purpose, I try to get out of them very quickly. And I'm a person that I believe like your purpose. Once you identify your purpose, you can effectuate that purpose in a lot of different ways, right? So for me, I know I'm an advocate. I'm an empowerer. I could do that in a lot of ways. I could do that as a teacher, I could do that as potentially a therapist. I could do that as an attorney. I think that's how I ended up in law. But so I think that some people will identify purpose as a career, and I don't look at purpose as a career. I look at purpose as your mission, right? And
Mission,
your
everything that
mission
you
can
put your
be,
hands to
yes,
do.
yes, and your mission can be done in different careers. And so, whether it's in sports, whether it's in the law, whether it's volunteering with my sorority, I try to make sure that what I'm doing is aligned with that purpose. And I can tell pretty instantly if it's not. Like, I don't feel right. My impact isn't the same. So it's like I got
Yeah.
to skirt on out of that
You're
and
screwing you
go
out.
something else. Yeah, yeah.
I'm reading this book, and it's called Emotional Intelligence Mindfulness. It's a Harvard
Mm,
Business Review book, small book.
okay.
And I was on a plane the other day, and a passenger actually gave it to me. And the book talks about just being in a place of mindfulness. And it
Mm,
mentioned two words. One word was focus, and the other word was
mm,
awareness. And
mm.
so talks about being focused on what the task at hand or what you're doing,
Yes,
but also being aware of the distractions that may come along the same time, and being able to say no and maneuver
yes,
out of those
yes.
things.
Yes, and that is so clutch and key, whether you're talking about your personal life or you're talking about your professional life, right?
Professional.
Because
Hmm.
if you have focus in your personal life, then you can focus and awareness in your personal life, then you can identify when there are people in your space that shouldn't be in there. And
Absolutely.
you can easily remove yourself from those situations when that becomes apparent. And it's the same in your career. I think that you do come in contact with these people, these opportunities, that are not aligned with your purpose, right? And you might get in them, they're not, and you realize that you should get out, and sometimes getting out takes a little longer than you think it
Than you
should.
expected,
But
yeah.
yes, but you're also learning, right? And you're taking these lessons about yourself and about life, and that's helpful in the next level,
Yeah.
of fulfilling your purpose. So I think in pursuing our purpose and being focused and aware, we can't also be too hard on ourselves when we sort of get off track a little bit, because I think
Yeah.
even when we get off track, that's
It was for a
valuable to us
purpose.
at the end of it. Absolutely.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. And the reason why I asked you that question in regards to, are your priorities purpose driven? I think a lot of times, and this goes for anybody that's listening to this podcast or this interview, a lot of times we may think that this is what our purpose is because this is
Mhm.
what we assume, or this is something that we dreamed of. But when
Yes,
you really when you're really doing something and you know for a fact that it's inspiring and it's giving to
yes,
others, and it's less
yes,
about you and more about what you're able to give, I think that's when you know you found something that is key.
Yes, absolutely.
And so
Absolutely. And you
you
can
said,
keep doing that, right? Even though that thing might call for you to give a lot of
yeah,
yourself, right? And a lot of your time. When you know, you're still inspired to keep doing it.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
no, absolutely. So we're talking about 2020. 2020 is coming to an
Oh,
end, thank
child.
God.
Thank the Lord.
What My next question is, what social cause do you strongly feel about, based on this whole 2020? I know we have elections coming up soon. I'm not going to go into
Yeah.
politics or anything like that, but
Yeah.
as 2020 comes to an end, what social cause do you feel strongly about?
I mean, I feel strongly about gladiators. I look at gladiators as a social cause. It's
Absolutely,
our push is for elevating a group of society that has been disenfranchised, that has been controlled, that has been discriminated against, and that's women. And so I feel even more encouraged and motivated to um, keep doing what we're doing for women. I just think, as we look at the political landscape, I think in general, sports is a microcosm for the world, right? So if we
yes,
look at what's going on in politics, we look at what's going on in society as a whole, which I view as in ways an attack on women. I think that you see that in sports as well. um, so I think it's just my job to keep pushing the envelope for women. I think you are definitely seeing growth in like viewership and revenue, and organizations, companies are finally starting to see where they can make money in women's sports.
absolutely.
But that doesn't mean that the work is
It's
done,
done.
not by any stretch of the
It's
imagination.
the
So
beginning.
it is legit just the beginning. So yeah, I want to continue pushing women forward.
Okay. What
Yeah.
advice what advice would you like to share, with those who are uncertain of this journey? And we talked about the journey, and then a lot of things happen within the process of this journey. So what advice would you like to share to those who are uncertain about this journey and what's expected in the sports industry?
Yeah, I would say you got to get comfortable with uncertainty, because it's always uncertain. There in life, there are no guarantees, right? And so I think the first thing that people should do in order to become successful in their lives and their careers is sort of being okay with being uncomfortable, right? And once you understand that, all right, I don't have control of the situation, I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm going to follow like my motivations, I'm going to follow my passions regardless. I think you can live like a fearless life. So get comfortable with the uncertainty of the times. I don't think they're going to get, maybe they'll be less uncertain, hopefully in 2021, but they'll still be uncertain. We won't have any control. And then what was the second part of the question?
And what's
What to
expected,
expect.
yeah, in the
Yeah.
sports industry, especially for those who are interested
Yeah.
in that
I,
business.
I think what's expected is for you to be hardworking. I think you're expected to be authentic. So there's a million and one people who want to work in sports in many different capacities, right? What's going to set you apart from all of those people is being yourself. Like you as a person have a gift for this world. You have a gift to offer sports if that's where you want to work in. So be true to yourself, so that, as you're working hard, as you're connecting the dots and meeting the people, that you're able to have genuine impact. And I think if you're yourself and you have that impact, that leads to career longevity. So work hard, be yourself. And then I think the other expectation is like making those connections. It's networking. Sports, although it seems like it's big, it's a very small community of people. And I think that if you want to be successful in it, get intentional about networking, so that when it's time to get promoted, it's time to get the jobs you want, you have that sort of I guess it's a bit of a, what's the word I'm looking for? It helps your trajectory to have
Correct.
a base of people
Hmm.
underneath you that are willing to support you and
Support you.
willing to cape for you
Hmm.
when you don't know that you need somebody
Yeah.
speaking up on your behalf.
Yeah. And kind of adding to that is kind of like different organizations
Yeah,
that you should get involved with based on the industry, no matter what
yes,
industry that you're
yes,
involved with. But find those different community involvement groups. Those
yes.
I'm part of the
Like
national
gladiators.
like gladiators, and
Yep.
also BSP. I don't know if you're
Oh yes,
familiar with
Black Sports.
National Society of Black Sports Professionals,
Yes.
and
Yep.
so I'm part of the BSP here in Miami. So I just preach to people just to get involved with
Yes.
something that gives you a purpose, and that you
Yes.
feel like you are impacting, but you're connecting.
Yes.
And so
Yes.
that's why I love your platform that you have with GladiateHers, because you're impacting women, you're pushing the envelope, and you're inspiring others to get up and to keep moving the needle. And
Thank you.
so,
Thank you.
no, yeah, I appreciate you. So at the end of the show, we normally ask our guests,
Okay.
especially for the Women in Sports series,
I
list
already got my
three.
answers.
You already got your answers
I
already?
got my
Oh,
answers.
man. List three women that you would like to nominate to tell their stories on our Women in Sports series.
Well, number one, she was on here earlier. I don't know if she's still in here. Asia Crowder. Like you need to have her on.
And I know Asia because I had her husband on here with my second
Well, what
episode.
you
So,
waiting on there? What you
Asia, you coming
waiting
next, Asia. You coming next. You heard it from me.
on? I would also say Ednisha Curry. She is currently the only woman coaching in men's Division I college basketball.
Wow.
So you need to have her on.
And
And
her name
then
is?
I would Ednisha Curry. I'll text it to
Okay.
you.
Okay.
Yep. And then I would say there's a woman. Her name is Sarah Creenan, Crennan. And she is an exec over at Yahoo Sports, but she was also a former student athlete. And she has like a really cool story to tell. So those
Okay.
are the three women that I nominate.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that. I'm definitely going to reach out to them, and,
I'll
and,
give you
and
their contact. I'll hook it up for you.
I appreciate it so much. And just to push to push this information forward, for those that are watching, I wanted to inspire people to know that, our motto for the show, Life After Sports, is when one career ends, a whole new
Yes,
set of opportunities begin. And
yes,
so I want people to know, no matter what career that you in, or if you're losing your job with this whole COVID-19 and different
yes,
things are happening to you, just know when one door closes, when one opportunity
yes,
closes, there's a whole new set of opportunities. And sometimes you just got to throw yourself out there.
yes. And yeah, look for and manufacture your own opportunities is absolutely what people I think should focus on.
So with that being said, I'm proud. I think this was a fabulous interview with a
Yes, I
phenomenal
had a
woman.
great time.
And I
Thank
just
you.
want to say thank you for taking the time to come on our show, Life After Sports podcast, with your host, Kevin Johnson, episode 23, Cecelia Townes. Thank you so much, CEO of GladiateHers. And I just want to say thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. I had a great time.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Have a great day and be
You
blessed.
too.
All right.
Happy Halloween. Be blessed.
Happy Halloween. I know, right?
All
You take care, okay?
right. Bye bye.
All right, then, bye-bye.